Hey scholars, this is a lecture video that goes with chapter 4 in our course textbook on verbal communication. So I'm going to be highlighting a number of things from the chapter. I recommend obviously that you're looking at the PowerPoint, that you're reading through the PowerPoint, following along in the PowerPoint as you're watching this video. Obviously the PowerPoint document, the PowerPoint presentation, and the video are all in the same module. So here we go. That second slide where it says there's two main themes for the chapter, which is that words are powerful and that you choose language. Simply put, words are very powerful, right? We choose language, we choose the words that come out of our mouth. Sometimes we regret the words that come out of our mouth, but nevertheless we still choose them because of our volitional control. And sometimes those words are very powerful. At least words have the capacity to be extremely powerful, so powerful that they can be crippling or enlightening and encouraging. So words have a lot of power. The second slide on, I'm sorry, the slide 3 where it says social construction of reality. That's like the Wikipedia definition overview of this theory, the social construction of reality. Very long, very detailed. You don't need to know all those details in that slide right there. There's a whole book written on this thing, but basically the the main takeaway from the social construction of reality is that in order to have meaning, in order for two humans to have meaning, we have to construct symbols, and there has to be a shared consensus on what those symbols mean. Symbols meaning letters, and you put letters together in certain ways, and they make words. You put words together in certain ways, following the rules of language, and they form sentences and assertions and statements and questions, and we use them to express our feelings. And there's a general understanding of what everything means based upon the nature of language. So slide 4 right there. So language is, you all have a dominant language that you speak. Some of you are bilingual. Some of you are trilingual. Nevertheless, this is a course where I'm speaking English. So with English, there's a system of symbols ruled by grammar, organized by syntax, common to community people. Symbols is the letters, right? Punctuation, etc. Grammar is the correct usage of those, and then syntax is the arrangement of your words. If you use incorrect syntax, then if I'm trying to say I'm hungry for food versus food hungry for am I, right? It's like it's the same words, but they're all kind of jumbled. That's incorrect syntax. So syntax is the arrangement of words. Grammar is the proper usage of words, conjugations, etc., and then symbols is the letters. And it's common to community people, so we all understand what that means. The authors talk about all the different functions of language. So we use language to control things, to share information, to express our feelings, to express creativity, and to ritualize a variety of things. Whether you're let's say you're a person who is working as a manager, you work as a working professional. You're using language to control the outcome of whatever product that you're selling, whatever thing that you're dealing with. You're using language within your HR manuals, within the rules, with all those different things for how you use language to control to a degree, right? How things go within your workplace. We use language to share information. How would I know how you're doing unless you share information with me? We use it to express feelings. I might make guesses on how you feel. I might speculate how you feel based upon your facial expressions or your body language. But unless you actually express them with language, with verbal communication, I don't really know. I can just make guesses. So if I really want to tell you how I feel, I have to use words to do that. And we also use language to express creativity. Think about um, historically, like we have musicians who write music, who write songs and sing songs and all that kind of stuff. Um, and then nowadays, more so, we use language to express creativity within the world of apps, right? With the world of apps is crazy, right? It's blown up over the last decade or so. But at the very at the end of the day, like people are using language, let's say in computer code. I don't know much about computers, but if you know how to write code and you speak HTML, so for lack of a better term, you know how you can utilize like the language of computers, the language of computer engineering and all that kind of stuff to write code that can create amazing apps, right? Creative apps. That's just one example. And then, of course, we use the one function of language is for ritualizing. So if you look at slide 6, so ritualizing is a way that we use language to sort of or one function of language is that we use it to ritualize certain types of experiences. So I give some examples that they're examples of normal culturally expected words or phrases. So let's say you're greeting someone at a party, right? You go to a party, a family party, a friend party, a work party. There's certain things that you typically say, "Hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going?" Right? There's certain things that you say, and that sort of it's a ritual. For me personally, I don't typically say, "Hey, how's it going?" I just say, "Hey, it's nice to see you." That's just me. That's how I ritualize that experience when I go see someone. Um, Maybe I don't have enough time to really know how they're doing to talk to them, but I know that I'll see them for 5 seconds and I say, "Hey, it's nice to see you." I give them a hug and I move on. At networking events, so if you're as a working professional, as someone who's aspiring to be a working professional, when you go to networking events, you should know how to use language. When you interrupt someone, when you're giving your 30-second elevator speech. When you meet someone that you're rubbing elbows or rubbing shoulders with a person who has the job that you want to have, you need to ritualize that meeting with language where it's very rehearsed and it's to the point. You have a 30-second way of introducing who you are, why you're there, what you're good at, and so on and so forth. Job interviews, same kind of thing. Loss of life. You find out that someone has a loss of life. What research shows is that when someone has experienced loss and they're going through grief and trauma and that kind of thing, one of the best things that you can do is just have a simple phrase of, "I'm so sorry for your loss," period. What oftentimes happens is people will add to that and they say like, "Well, at least," and they add all these other phrases and terms that in many cases doesn't do any good. It doesn't actually make the person feel better, and in many cases it makes the person more upset, right? But what research shows, one of the best things to do is say, "I'm so sorry for loss," and then depending on your relationship with the person, offering a hug or something like that, or a hand on the shoulder. And they mentioned there like when you're making a phone call or you're talking to a coworker. I had a job I had an internship at a public relations firm, and our standard was if I were to interrupt a coworker, the before talking to them or asking the question, I first have to say, "Are you interruptible?" In other words, I can't just go up to Laura and say, "Hey, Laura, I had a quick question on blah blah blah." Just like, no, I first have to say, "Are you interruptible?" And then Laura might say, "No, I'm not, but give me 10 minutes." And then I come back in 10 minutes. And there's actually a reason for that because if she's on a phone call with someone and um, her client is paying her for that phone call, or she's working on an email and I interrupt her for a few minutes, well, now that client's paying me to interrupt her. So that's part of the ritual of using language to ritualize that experience. Or when you're making a phone call to someone, especially if it's business, one of the things that I do in my business is, "Hey, it's Jonathan," and so on and so forth. Is now a good time to talk? So instead of just assuming that they can talk to me, I pretty much always ask, "Is now a good time to talk?" And that way I give them the opportunity to say, "Actually, hey, can you call me back in 5 minutes, 10 minutes tomorrow?" Right. So those are just some examples of the ways that language can ritualize, excuse me, all kinds of communication scenarios. This is something that a lot of you experience. Slide 7, bypassing words is when two words, I mean, when one word has two different meanings. The same words have different meanings. What it means to be on time. That's a very subjective thing. Or you say like, "Oh, that's sick." When something's sick, right? That means that you have a fever or you're feeling under the weather, or might mean that it's cool, like something's cool, right? We use that term "sick." That's been around since I was a youth. Or even like what it means to be polite, right? What it means to be polite for one person might differ for someone else. On to slide 8. The authors differentiate between denotative and connotative the denotative and connotative level of language. This is pretty straightforward. Denotative is the dictionary definition of a word. Connotative is the level of language that conveys feeling. So denotative dictionary definition of car, automobile with four wheels. engine and so on and so forth. But the connotative level talks about feelings. Maybe for you, you're really into cars, and so your relationship to car is much different than automobile with four wheels. It does something for you, right? You have an emotional connection to cars. So that's subjective, right? There's two different levels of language. Another example there with on slide 9. What college is? College, an institution of higher education where people go to get a degree, right? Denotative level, dictionary definition. But connotative level is college is like, hey, this is the thing that's going to get me to the next point in my life. College might represent positive emotions and negative emotions, a mix of emotions, right? So you might have a more of emotional connection to that than other people. On to slide 10, there's the problematic uses of language. There's um, quite a lot of research on the topic of hurtful messages and then profanity, civility. I have a clip there. Hopefully, you're able to play it. If not, not a huge deal. There's a clip from the famous movie Home Alone, where Kevin and his family members are getting into an argument. But pay attention to as you watch. Hopefully, you watch that clip. Pay attention to the way that language is used in sort of a hurtful way, right? His brother is teasing him, and then he says some mean things to his mom. His mom says things to him. His family members are saying mean things. This is all an example. Of course, it's all good and fun, but it's all an example of hurtful messages. And in real life, certain words can be quite destructive and powerful in a negative way, but also powerful in a positive way. The authors then also talk about this well-known theory called the communication accommodation theory. So the authors talk about code switching, which is something that I think pretty much all of you can relate to. You engage in code switching when let's say you're having a conversation with your friends versus your coworkers versus, hey, maybe you have really young siblings or family members. You're 20 years old and you have young cousins who are like 10 years old or younger, or you're talking to your grandparents. We're always like switching our codes, our speech repertoires, like how we talk and the certain words that we say. I have nieces and nephews, a number of nieces and nephews who are between the ages of 11 and 17. So I hear the way that they talk, and they're code switching when they're talking with themselves versus with the aunts and uncles and so on and so forth. Another two other components of communication accommodation theory, or just CAT, is convergence and divergence. Pretty straightforward. Convergence is when you converge, is when you accommodate, when you make changes to accommodate, let's say, a new person. I might be adjusting my communication style to accommodate someone else, right? So let's say my 17-year-old niece is talking about something. I'm not really following what you're saying because she's using like the types of language, the types of words in the language that she uses with her friends. I think she's a junior in high school. So I'm like, I'm not really following Hallie, and then she might say, like, oh, okay, Uncle Johnny, here's what I mean. So she might be converging, right? She's accommodating me, knowing that I don't really know what she's talking about. So she's accommodating the fact that my speech background doesn't really flow with her. So she explains it in a way that I understand. So that's one example of convergence. Divergence is when um, you you don't accommodate, and you let's say maybe even overemphasize the correct way of doing something. I might engage in divergence with, let's say, if my kids are trying to they're pronouncing a word, or they're saying a word the wrong way, and I correct them or something like that because I want them to learn the correct way of something. I have the example there. No, the freeway. When I lived in Louisiana, I asked someone, I said, hey, how do I get to the 10 freeway? And the person looked at me and they said, huh? They looked confused because this is the South. And I said, how do I get to the 10 freeway? And the person looked at me and they said, oh, you mean the interstate? And I was like, oh, yes, the interstate, because that's what they call it. I could have, and then that's me converging, right? That's me accommodating. That's how they talk about it. That's what they call it. So I'm going to be accommodating to that because like I'm used to calling things the freeways, but there they call it the interstate. But if I had said, no, I mean the freeway, well, that's divergence because I'm like, no, that's how I want to do it. All that to say, there's consequences, and there's consequences for either convergence or divergence. If I had said, no, I mean the freeway, well, I think that probably would have not come off really well, and that would have been offensive, and that person would have probably looked at me as you know, not in a good way, right? The plus side of convergence is I'm more accepted, right? I'm more accepted into their culture, they're more accepting in me, and so on and so forth. So that's some examples of communication accommodation theory. Slide 12 there, that's just more of a fun thing where I talk about that, or that video on slide 12 talks about accents. So a lot of people have been curious, like, well, how have accents formed? And then there's this other concept of, let's say you're from Alabama and you have a deep Southern Alabama accent, but then you live in a different state. Maybe you move to California, and your Southern accent kind of washes away because you're converging, right? You're converging to this new accent of California, a non-Southern accent. But then every once in a while you go back home to Alabama, and all of a sudden, boom, that that accent comes back full force. So some people don't do that. Some people, they do not accommodate. They don't try to change their accent. They always are true to their accent of their dominant accent. And some people actually take classes to sort of wash away their accent. It's kind of an interesting concept. But this is just one way of understanding communication accommodation theory. Um, so again, the slide 13. So two main themes for this chapter, for this section, is that words are very powerful. You choose language. So I have a link here to a Freakonomics podcast. What You don't have to click on this link, because I'm going to have this. The link here is going to be tied into a Canvas assignment. I just have it here because this is what we would have done in the classroom, and I had to make some changes. Sort of wasn't planning to make changes. This is what we would have done in the class, but obviously classes were canceled, so I'm making changes for this particular week. Slide 14. So the podcast has to do with the fact that humans don't like change, right? We don't like saying that we don't know how to do things. Generally speaking, humans don't like change. We're consistent, we're predictable. There are theories in persuasion called consistency and consistency theories. So there's all these kinds of theories that are based on being able to predict people's, let's say, being able to predict consumer purchasing behaviors. Um, People in marketing and advertising capitalize on the fact that as humans, we're pretty predictable and we're very consistent. One example of consistency is like brand loyalty. Brand loyalty is one of the things that you're definitely aiming for as an advertiser. If people are always choosing your brand, you're good to go. We're also always taught the importance of strictly following directions. We're always supposed to do things a certain way. So this podcast has to do with saying I don't know. The podcast is titled the three hardest words in the English language are admitting that you don't know the answer. Saying I don't know. Someone asks you a question, you say I don't know. Especially in the workplace, if your customers are asking you about things, or your boss is asking you about things, it's very difficult to say I don't know. So perhaps ponder on, why do you think it's so difficult to say that? What do you think people associate with saying I don't know the answer? These are questions for you to just be thinking about right now as you're listening to this video. You'll be watching or listening to the podcast. Like I said, I'll have all the instructions for the podcast, for the Canvas assignment in Canvas. But this discussion, this PowerPoint, this chapter goes along with the Canvas assignment. So in terms of the discussion, sometimes people fake it, right? They pretend like they know the answer to something even when they don't. They don't admit that they don't know the answer. So the question is, what are the alternatives? And the way that this is linked to verbal communication is that it's verbal communication. When you don't know the answer to something, what do you say? You could say, I don't know, but there's all kinds of other things that you could say other than just saying, I don't know. You can be strategic, right? You can be strategic with your communication instead of just saying, I don't know, which kind of gives the impression that maybe you're uneducated or incompetent, which it doesn't necessarily mean that. It might mean that, or it might just mean you're extremely competent and very educated. But on this one particular issue that you're asking about, I'm not really sure what the answer is. So instead of just saying, I don't know, what are some other things that you can say when people ask you questions where you don't know the answer? How do we use appropriate language to admit that you don't know the answer? So that's strategic. So what what you'll be doing for the Canvas assignment. Here's sort of a preview. You'll talk about a time when you gave an answer to a question that when you didn't know the answer. You'll talk about what was the context, why did you do it, what would have been better to say. So that's it for this chapter for the lecture video, and of course this discussion, PowerPoint, etc., goes with the Canvas assignment, which you will have access to and you need to do. Okay, that's it. Hope you're doing well. Bye.